Hi everybody, happy Tuesday, June 30th, last day of June, and it is scorching outside. We're just a few days away from 4th of July, and of course, still the America 250 celebration. So this week, going with my history trend, I wanted to talk about my personal Mount Rushmore of non-presidents, okay? So who do I think are the most influential people in the history of America who were not president? And so to me, the first three are relatively easy, no-brainers. Of course, this is my opinion. So first, there's two founding fathers I think have to go on the list, Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Hamilton. So Benjamin Franklin, many Europeans apparently think he was president. He's so famous. He helped draft and sign the Declaration of Independence and signed the United States Constitution. He's the only founding father who signed four key documents. He created the 1778 Treaty of Alliance with France, the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which ended the war. He was the chief negotiator. And as the oldest delegate to the Constitutional Convention, he lent his critical compromise and wisdom to the proceedings and signed that. So he signed the Declaration of Independence, the French Alliance Treaty, and the Treaty of Paris. He was also an inventor. He improved that, of course, the famous lightning experiment with his kite. He invented a type of stoves, bifocals, and apparently a urinary catheter. And he was also into oceanography and mapped the Gulf Stream. I'm just a brilliant man. He was also an abolitionist. After starting his life as a slaveholder, he became a passionate abolitionist later in life, promoting the education and integration of African Americans. And like I said, his diplomacy with the French was huge in winning the Revolutionary War. Alexander Hamilton, talked a bit about him last week with his biography. He was really the financial architect of our entire country and set the groundwork for our capitalist society, which became probably the most powerful economy the world has ever seen. He stabilized the near bankrupt republic at the early stages after the Revolution, established the first United States Bank and the Mint. The Federalist Papers were written to try to convince the public about the Constitution, and he wrote 51 of those 85 essays. We still read those today, like in law school. He was a famous in the Revolutionary War. He was pretty heroic. He was George Washington's aide-de-camp, but then he also finally got the opportunity to fight at the Battle of Yorktown. He was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention and signed the Constitution, and he was one of the founders of the Federalist Party in 1791. He also invented or established the New York Post and the U.S. Coast Guard, but really just his insight. And when you read his biography and see where he came from, the fact that he was so brilliant is just crazy. Third one, which I think is also a no-brainer, is Martin Luther King Jr. Obviously more recent, but really if you think about it, he was only on the scene tragically for a very short time. For about 13 years, from the mid-50s until he was assassinated in April of 1968. But his leadership and inspiration really changed the country for the better. He drew inspiration from his Christian faith and the peaceful, nonviolent protest of Gandhi. His "I Have a Dream" speech is probably, definitely one of the two or three most famous speeches in the country's history, if not number one. His letter from a Birmingham jail is also something you still read in law school to this day, and some of the most revered writings we have in our country, taught to children of all ages and races. He was instrumental in the Montgomery bus boycott and in getting the, Equal Rights, Civil Rights Act passed in '64, the Voting Rights Act in '65. So really an influential and important American. Now, the last one on the Mount Rushmore is more difficult. A lot of people think it was like a longtime senator like Henry Clay. There's an argument to be made based on our economy and our culture that somebody like Henry Ford or Rockefeller or even personal favorite of Walt Disney might be. But I think that is ignoring, half of our population. And so for my fourth on the Mount Rushmore, I'm going to go with Susan B. Anthony. She was a famous women's rights activist in the 1800s. She devoted her life to racial, gender, and educational equality, and played a prominent role in the women's suffrage movement. She was arrested for illegally voting in a presidential election in 1872. She fought for the right for the women to own property. She fought for the right for women to be able to be admitted into colleges. She was the first woman to appear on a U.S. coin, and she paved the way really for the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. I actually wrote the first draft of it, which gave women the right to vote. And sadly, she never lived to see it. The 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, 14 years after she passed away. And I know there's a lot of women that could, I've read a few biographies of Harriet Tubman, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. There was a lot of women that were important in that role. There's been a lot of women that have been important throughout the history of the country, but not to take away from what Susan B. Anthony did, but I think it's important to, a lot of the other stuff would never happen without her tireless effort. So that is my Mount Rushmore of non-presidents who's been the most influential people in American history. So I don't know if people agree or not, but have a good week and talk to you later.